It's been an honor, Margaret and Nigel, to have you here. Margaret has been teaching, lecturing, and educating people about physical education for a longest period of time in her career. And today, I'm honored and privileged to have you both here. Welcome to all of you. Over to Margaret. I would love to hear your journey and your experiences and why you have to devise this concept called physical literacy.
Thank you very much. I can't see you, Gopichand. Should I be able to see you?
Yes, I think I will just, since so many of them are waiting, I don't want to touch the technology anymore. So I think I will just let you start talking and I will figure the other way out.
If in the meantime I could see you, that would be lovely. But can I say how honored I am to be working with you, Sri Gopichand, and I look forward to sharing some of my views and discussing some of the issues with you. And I think that you've got an outline of my career roughly on the information that you were sent. And you can see that I have been active in physical activities all my life. And I'm passionate about physical activity. I've always been involved in tennis, dance, camping, trained as a PE teacher, etc. So my background is one through which my involvement in physical activity has been central to developing self-esteem and confidence. So for me, physical activity has been extremely important and valuable in my life. However, as I was continuing to work with students and schools and lecturers and research, I was very saddened to see that there was less and less physical activity going on in the UK and generally around the world. Too many people took no part in physical activity. And when I talk about physical activity, I'm including not only sport, which is an important part, but dance, yoga, sailing, Pilates, a whole range of physical activities. I tend not to use the word sport because it has a connotation for competitive team games, which are fine, but they're only part of what is on offer on physical activity. And alongside seeing that there was less physical activity, I noticed that there was a rise in obesity and there were mental health problems. So what I was seeing around me was very, very disturbing from my perspective. And equally, I was saddened by the way in which physical activity and physical education were being considered in the school. It seemed that in the UK, physical activity was not valued in the curriculum. And Western cultures generally see human embodiment as of little value. In school, there was a lot of stress on the elite, and the current concepts focused on approaches that promoted exclusivity. Somehow, PE teachers were becoming second-class citizens, and many pupils became disillusioned, and they concluded that physical activity was not for them. So there were two concerns: what was happening out in the world, and secondly, that the attitudes towards physical activity and the value of it seemed to be waning or disappearing. And I instinctively felt that there was great value in physical activity. So I was very concerned that this was not being reflected in schools, in cultures, and in people's lives. So my passion for and experiences in physical activity led me to study philosophy, to see if I could pick up some leads about the value of physical activity. And I have to say, I was heartened and excited to find support for the value of our physical capabilities, our embodied dimension, our motility, in a number of philosophies. And I found support from these three philosophies: monism, existentialism, and phenomenology. They all argued strongly or presented theses that supported physical activity. Now, monist philosophy refutes dualism, and therefore there's no split between the body and the mind. We are a whole. So there was no attitude that the mind was important or the body was unimportant. For a monist, all aspects of our human being are equally important. And there's a lot of research that's gone on about embodied cognition and an essentially embodied existence. We don't have a body as a sort of an object, but we live our body. And as being at the heart of existence, being involved in all we do, clearly the monist was saying, yes, our embodiment is of enormous value. Then the existentialist brought forward the idea that we become who we are as we live, so that existence precedes essence. We become who we are, and we become who we are because of the way we interact with the world around us. All those aspects of the human that enable this interaction therefore make a huge contribution to who we are and to the human nature and human characteristics. And existentialists are quite adamant that embodiment is involved in interaction with the world and therefore is very important for feeding our quality of life. Phenomenology builds on existentialism and looks at perception and argues that we perceive from an embodied position. So our embodied position influences how we see the world, how we interpret the world, and therefore, as part of perception, then our embodiment is to be valued. So I came from a situation where I was worried about what was happening to a situation where it seemed that I had substantial support for what I believed strongly in, that there was enormous value in capitalizing on our motility. So I felt then empowered to work hard and to advocate the value of physical activity. My next problem was, how was I going to communicate this? How could I describe what I was wanting to get through? There was no common concept that focused on individuals' lifelong engagement in physical activities. I needed to identify a desirable state of affairs in relation to attitudes towards physical activity, towards taking up physical activity. And after much debate, discussion, plus soul searching, I decided to describe this as physical literacy. And you may or may not know that the definition, there are two parts of the definition. The end of the definition says, what it's all about is getting people to value and take responsibility for engaging in physical activities for life. So part of the definition says, this is where we want to go, this is where we are focused on. And the first part of the definition talks about how we might get there. And it proposes that if people develop the motivation, confidence, physical competence, and knowledge and understanding to value and take responsibility for engagement in physical activity for life, that's where we are at the moment. We are passionate in the International Association to promote physical literacy. We believe that the way to foster it is to work on motivation, to work on confidence, to work on physical competence, of course, and knowledge and understanding. So you can see that the monist principles have gone into the definition, because within the definition, very importantly, the person is seen as a whole. And if they are seen as a whole, and if they're seen as unique, then I believe that that is the way into fostering positive attitudes towards physical activity. So let's just go through the key aspects of physical literacy again. Number one.
Margaret,
Yes.
I think
Yes.
I think Gopichan's going to just ask you something.
All right, that's fine.
Wonderful. I think it's a clear explanation because we all get to know from you why motivation precedes everything, and then it's the confidence, physical competence, knowledge, and the understanding to value physical and take responsibility for doing physical activity for life. I think that was a clear explanation of what physical literacy was. Is physical literacy, and how important is early years for building something which takes for somebody who takes the responsibility to for doing physical activity for life? How important is the engagement in early years, and what is the effect it has later in life?
Thank you, Gopachand. The concept of physical literacy is from birth right through to death. And clearly the philosophy is supporting the value of physical activity throughout the whole life. So it doesn't separate. So the philosophy supports everybody. It's extremely important for in early years, particularly for early years, for the young child to have opportunities to explore the world and to be active. In the literature, it talks about the importance of 1,000 hours a year for each year of the early years for floor time, so that they are actually involved in moving, in strengthening their muscles, in developing their strong necks, their strong backs. In the early years, you've got the physical development, the genetic physical potential that they have, and this potential must be nurtured as far as possible so that the young child is actually achieving what they are encoded to achieve in their development, their growth, their height, their coordination, their balance, their stability, all the basic, what I've called movement capacities. It's absolutely crucial that they are given opportunities inside the home and outside the home to safely engage in as much physical activity as possible. And at the same time as this is being provided by the parent, there needs to be encouragement, positive support, and helping them to improve, etc. But everything really positive. So they have a sense of when they're moving, this is important, it's valued, it's productive, it's enjoyable, it's pleasurable. And so in the early years, I would hope to see that there is an attitude of passion and enjoyment, of love of movement, which is helped by all who they come in contact with. And they have the opportunity to realize their full physical potential. And therefore, they're building a very strong basis for moving up into a more structured approach in the early primary years, where they are going to be working with others, they're going to have equipment, they're going to have more demands. If the child has no experience or lacks movement at an early age, they're missing the very key foundation which launches them into the world of physical activity and the enjoyment and the benefits from it. It's very hard if the child has had no encouragement or opportunity at that age for them to catch up in when they come into school. So I think it is critically important, and we're looking at physical competence, physical growth, and we're looking at motivation and developing their confidence through physical activity. So absolutely basic, Gopi.
Yeah, wonderful. Can I ask you something which is more personal? When did you, in your age, at what age, which time, is there a particular moment or a particular year in your teaching career or in your life where you thought of this, or the philosophy, the insights of the philosophy came to you? Anybody who prompted you, or any experience which prompted you to do that?
Very briefly, I worked at a number of institutions, and one of the first institutions after school, after I taught, was a college, and it was a wonderful medium for people to support each other and question and look for reasons and debate. So it was a very fertile context that I was in. And there were people very interested in physical activity. And those people suggested to me that I should look at philosophy. And therefore, I was encouraged by people, I was supported in my passion. And when I found monism, existentialism, and phenomenology, this was music for my ears. All the things that I instinctively felt that were so important to me were being backed up by the philosophy. I mean, I can talk about situations in physical activities, in dance, in tennis, and camping, which were instrumental. But I think it was this unanswered question about why did I feel so passionate? Why was it so important? And that really led me on to study and do my
Wonderful.
PhD and continue to work
If
even
I
now.
can.
Yes.
Wonderful. For many of us, sport would mean elite sport. And for me, in my own life, um, when I saw that elite sport had a lot of relevance and a lot of importance from a national perspective,
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
but
You're
it
breaking up.
necessarily
I'm
didn't
sorry, I
mean well
can't
for
hear
all
you.
children. And
I'm sorry, I couldn't get the question. It was breaking up.
so
Margaret, if I can come in,
saw a lot of
Gopi.
champions being broken, a lot of kids wanting to win at all costs, a lot of kids who did not win or did not succeed, drawing evidence. One of the first things which I felt in sport. For me, what for me, elite sport has meant a lot of importance from a national perspective. But I also could see that sport value was not all the time there, because some were broken individuals. Sometimes kids who didn't were not succeed in sport, were really struggling. So can you put some sports and general sports for everyone? How do we differentiate between both and the importance of each of them?
Margaret,
Yes, go on.
Margaret, to clarify,
Yes.
the sound was bad there.
Yes.
What Gopi is asking is how do we balance the importance of elite sport for many, and how elite sport often influences others, but how can we also then provide a range of physical activities for everyone? It's that thing we discussed the other day.
Yes, I think that, Gopi, I'll start with the breadth of activities. I think it's extremely important that as far as possible, in school and out of school, that youngsters have the opportunity of exploring a whole range of physical activities. Sport, competitive sport, is absolutely fine for some people. Some people will benefit from martial arts or from yoga. For some people, it will be a fitness exercise. For some people, it will be dance and all different forms of dance. I believe that there is some physical activity for everybody, but they're different. And without just having a very quick taster course of too many things, I think that we need to ensure that people are introduced to and encouraged to take part in a wide range of activities, which means that inside and outside school with support from parents. So let me just talk now, and we did mention this when we were talking in planning this, about the relationship between physical literacy and the Olympic movement and high quality performance. And having thought about it, I think there is a reciprocal relationship between the two. I think physical literacy can feed into the Olympic movement, feed into developing high-level athletes. And I also think that high-level athletes can promote physical literacy. So to start with the first one, if you start with a physical literacy focused experience in youth and at the beginning of school, and you have a passion and an interest, then you will be encouraged to work hard. And if you will have potential, I think that the physical literacy focus will bring to the fore those people who are exceptional. And if we have a really sound foundation, I strongly believe that those people who have got flair and ability and potential will be able to be identified, and then, if you might say, not necessarily handed on to coaches, but I'm not sure that this is the job of the teacher to really work with the elite. So I do think that there is benefit to the Olympic situation from physical literacy. Equally, I think that observers, children and adults, can be inspired by high-level performance, whether it's in competitive games or whether in dance. And this can promote progress in physical literacy. So it makes people want to take part. They want to emulate their idols. And this is wonderful. We found this in the UK when we had the Olympics. There was a huge surge of interest in a whole range of activities. People were inspired and wanting. So the Olympics can have a huge benefit for role models and inspiration. However, you have to remember that it's no good motivating people if there's nowhere for them to go to continue or find out. The women's hockey in UK were very clever about this. They thought about this way ahead of time. And outside the main stadium, there were 2 mini pitches, and people, older and younger people, were allowed to take part, and they enjoyed having a go of hockey. And then at the end of the time they've explored, the hockey people gave them information of where they could go in their home area to take part. Now, clearly this had taken some time, but I do believe if we can have opportunities that are provided and are out in society, I think that this inspiration from high-level Olympics is absolutely excellent. But let's excite them, and then there's nowhere for them to go. Is that okay? Gopi?
Yeah. For me, in India and across the world, a teacher is a very important component of it. How do you think in these times where physical education teachers are being dropped?
Are being
at the first instance, if you need to drop somebody, it's the physical education teacher who's taken out at these times. How do you think?
Well, you see, this is
Margaret.
Yeah.
If I can just check again, I think the intention was to ask about the training of teachers.
Yes, I've got that. Yes,
of teachers in elementary schools and things like that.
Yeah. I think that there are 2 levels. There really is a countrywide commitment. I mean, I think key professionals need to understand physical literacy and set up confident and assertive advocacy campaigns. Well, we need to have support from the top. We need to have support from the top. We need to realign the goal to participation throughout life for the benefit of everybody. And this whole commitment, this country commitment, should empower and support the PE teachers, because that we need to see them as actually key to starting and promoting this activity. So I passionately believe that if we really want to take physical literacy forward, if we really want to have lifelong participation, teachers must be respected. PE teachers mustn't be second-class citizens. They mustn't be required to leave if they want to shed staff, because they are an essential piece of the jigsaw puzzle in life. So primary teachers need a sound basic training of the concept and of the way to teach and the experiences that the young people should have. in a secondary school, as far as possible, we need a good many teachers who are aware again of the concept, they understand it, they understand the way to have supportive experiences, the way to assess and chart. The PE specialist is really important. They need adequate, maybe 2 or 3 years training with the trainers who understand and believe in physical literacy. We have got to have people advocating it right from the top. The teachers need a thorough and sound grounding in PE to include a strong focus on physical literacy. And they need to have insight into alternative pedagogies and how to create a wide range of activities. And I do believe that the PE teachers are, and the teachers are ready to do that, but they must be respected for what they're doing. We need the government, education, schools, health professionals, social services to be convinced and persuaded about the value of physical activity. And we need more time. We need more teachers, we need more training, we need more equipment, we need more facilities, more provision for adults out of school. We need to have it available and offer. It's not just a trivial diversion or extra, optional extra. For me, it's a key aspect of developing holistic health and a life where you could describe it as human flourishing, a flourishing life and quality of life. So I do believe that we have to look very carefully at people who are teaching, coaching, practitioners right along the whole physical activity spectrum, but it needs to have high level, governmental level of a real commitment to the value that physical activity can bring to life as we know it.
Physical education teachers, there's a saying, what good teacher is worth 1,000,000 books. How do you keep physical education teachers motivated? Any examples from your experience? And a supporting question to this would be that as a PE teacher, typically your success is attributed to your competitions. Is that the way of looking at it, or are we need to looking at it in another way?
Okay. What was the first part of the question?
Margaret,
I think there's. Go ahead, Nigel.
Yes,
Yeah.
all right. I think I'm with you. I think the most important thing for the physical education teacher is to feel valued, and for people in positions of authority. And I think that all the teachers, oh well, we need to use the hall, so it doesn't matter. We won't have physical education. We won't have physical activity. It's not important. I do think that they have got to be valued, and I think that they can do a good job if they are valued. I have seen in my life, I have seen inspirational teaching in the early years, in the primary years with special needs, and these experiences are engaging, they're relevant, they have purpose, and the young people develop the self-confidence that they need. I think that they need to look at different ways of interacting, they need to look at different ways of teaching strategies, and I think that there are some outstanding teachers across the world who are doing that. I think they can be successful if they understand the need to look at an individual in a holistic way and as unique. And every young person or older person who you've been involved with guiding need to leave the session to say, oh, I can do that, I enjoyed that, goodness me, yes, I want to come back for more. And promoting physical literacy, I think, is very much about how you teach, how you engage, example you set, rather than just the detail of the content. I'm not sure if I've answered the question, but I've made a few points.
Margaret, if I come, I'll try and clarify. I think Gopi mentioned the idea of continuing professional development, like the Elms Group are trying to do with the government schools, and sharing case studies of best practice and providing resources to support teachers to help them improve their practice. I think those are the sort of points he was looking for.
Yes, well, I mean, I quite agree. I think that training is all very well, but it has to be quite a lot of in-service training, because we have a lot of catching up to do. I think that's very important indeed. Yes. What else did you say?
Providing case studies, exemplar materials.
Yes. Let's take the point about models of good practice. It would be excellent if we could have a sort of a pincer type movement where we have got the senior people, or as far as senior as possible, advocating that this should happen. And if we've got people on the ground who are funded and supported to develop a physical literacy curriculum, a physical literacy focused curriculum, and as you say, if they could be funded to have better equipment and possibly an extra teacher and extra time, and if we could show that if these ideas of training, of equipment, of space, of time, of recognition actually resulted in people who were showing commitment and passion and motivation to take part, I think that would be tremendously helpful. So if we could have some models which are funded and then which can be shared, and if we've got support from the top, then we just might get somewhere.
In the meanwhile, if somebody has some questions, I think please post it on the chat box and we could ask Margaret and Nigel about the same. From my side, I think we've had, in our country, we have a lot of indigenous sports, we have dance forms, and how do you see physical activity in life and taking it over beyond childhood? Because I've heard some research which is actually says that only about 5% of people beyond the age of 26 in the US take part in physical activity, and which is a very low number. And the lack of physical activity is the #1 cause of disease now. So how do you think we can motivate elders or the middle-aged and above to take up physical activity as an activity for the rest of their lives?
Well, you ask a very difficult question. I think that it's got to be in the media. I think it's got to be explained about its holistic value. I think that the medical profession and the paramedical profession can help enormously. I sometimes think that people go to the doctor and they expect to come out with a prescription and some medicine. If they could come out with a recommendation that they should walk regularly or they should participate regularly. So if we have got support for self-help procedures or processes, and the health people are saying, yes, right, well then you need to be more active. That, Gopichan, depends on there being welcoming, well-equipped facilities in which they can do the activity. So it's no good motivating huge number of people unless there are sports fields, climbing walls, dance courses, water that we can use. So you have to prepare the opportunity. And when people are ready, when we've motivated them, when we've convinced them, the opportunity is there. And when we go as an older person into a situation where it's physical activity, there's no judgment about how good or how bad you are. Everybody is getting satisfaction or making progress, and it's a can-do experience. It's absolutely essential that there are places to go to, and those places are welcoming, supportive, really excited about progress, really working with each individual. What do you want to do? This is really got to be something which captures their interest, and they can follow it up, and they can be supported. And I think that could make a big difference.
If I can
Wonderful.
just one of the things you mentioned, Gopi, was about cultural activities, and it's really important for every country to embrace the cultural activities, because those are the activities that will provide the lifelong opportunities for people within the community. So Indigenous sports and dance should really be encouraged, and provisions should be allowed for that. I'm just picking up on some of the questions as well, and the mention of COVID-19. What's interesting in the UK is that the government has allowed and encouraged everyone to take exercise every day. So the three things we can do: we can get medical supplies, we can get food, and we're encouraged to take exercise. So that suggests a real priority about physical activity. And
Yes,
government,
can I come in there? I mean, when there was lockdown, Nigel, we had this conversation. One of the first concerns, interestingly, surprisingly, was, goodness me, there'll be no opportunity to have any form of physical activity, or only very brief. And this was amazing that we came once just to the top of the pile. There was real concern. And then we were allowed to exercise once a day. I have seen evidence, as I've been going on my daily walk, of families who are running, cycling, walking together, and getting enormous pleasure and enjoyment and feedback from that. I just really hope that the enforced experience of COVID will actually influence people after the lockdown is ceased, because it will be a positive experience that they've benefited from and enjoyed. So it has many bad outcomes, but I think if it's woken people up to the value and importance of physical activity and the quality it can add to life, then there are some positives.
I'll just pick up, because there's quite a few questions coming in on the chat, and it's about provision in relation to education and COVID-19 as well. And I've been fortunate enough to work with 3 heritage schools in the Delhi Gurgaon area, and they're providing a whole host of different activities online, whether that's online actual lessons, where they're getting the children to be practically active, or they're giving them challenges where they can be active. But the other thing is, there was a mention about cost, and as Margaret said, I have seen more people out exercising in the UK than I have ever done. I regularly run and cycle, and there are lots of people running, cycling and walking. So there's a lot of exercise that is actually free, and people appreciate their local environment by getting out there and being physically active.
Wonderful. Nigel, if I were to ask Margaret, one of the ways in which people think of developing sporting culture and fitness is to do physical tests for a whole bunch of people across the board. One of such initiatives was to test everybody in school depending on their physical ability. How do you view that viewpoint? Do you have, what are its advantages, what are its disadvantages, and whom do you do it for?
Yes. Now, fitness, I mean, I have to answer you from a physical literacy perspective, Gopi, but fitness issues play only a small part in physical literacy. I am not convinced that a lot of experiences in fitness activities is necessarily motivating for people to continue afterwards. So it is, as far as I'm concerned, it's clearly important. It's part of the knowledge package that people need to have. But I would say that given the shortage of time and money for PE in the curriculum, the inclusion of fitness work needs to be very carefully weighed. Is it producing information which will, in the long term, promote physical activity? If testing occurs, it needs to feed forward and result in lessons, curricula that match individual needs. It must be an educative focus. I'm concerned if a lot of time is being spent, and I wonder if that material is being used to inform better quality teaching, more relevant teaching. As I say, clearly fitness is an important issue, but it doesn't for me necessarily mean that participation in fitness or having a fitness test is going to benefit in the long term. So I would just be very mindful of, if we're giving time to fitness, can the time be better spent on engaging in a wider range of activities?
If I can just come in there, because I'm aware that there's a suggestion to test all Indian children in relation to their fitness. And what we have to remember is that every child is have a different capability, and actually testing them is not going to provide us with any valuable information. It's just a measure of a child at a particular point based on their capability. What is important, however, if you want to explain how people develop their fitness and sharing different ways of fitness training, so that educates people in regards to that, to allow them to take that on in future life, then there's a value to using testing as part of a learning process in relation to fitness. I'm just going to pick up on a couple of questions that have come out. Online teaching was one, and yes, we are doing this in relation to the current climate, but as I think Margaret has said, what's really important is the relationships and the positive learning environment that's created. That is the real key to developing that desire to be physically active for life, and that's quite hard to do online. Another question is about being physically literate, and I'll let Margaret answer that, because a lot of people use this term about being physically literate. Margaret?
Yes, well, it's not, physical literacy is not a state that you can achieve and then you've got whatever it is for life. Physical literacy is a disposition. You don't become physically literate, full stop, but you're on this journey throughout life, and you make progress, and maybe you regress because of certain things, and then you continue. So I regret to say it isn't something which you can be. You can't be physically literate. It's like happiness. Happiness, yes, you can be happy, but this is not a state that you can maintain throughout life. It needs to be nurtured and developed and used. So physical literacy is a disposition. It's an attitude, and I'm not sure that you can learn an attitude and have developed an attitude which you keep. But so therefore, it's not a state, it is a disposition, an attitude, a perception. Okay?
Yeah, Guppy, have you got another question, or should I pick up on some of the ones that have come from the chat?
Nigel, Gopi sir said you can pick up some questions from the chat itself.
Okay, I'll pick up some questions on the chat. Margaret, there's one here from that asks about the issue of facilities and public spaces. In India, the facilities are not the same as many other countries, and so how do people develop their physical literacy without the gyms, without the cycling tracks, without the sports halls and other facilities?
Well, of course, you ask a very difficult question, as I mentioned, in relation to exciting people after watching the Olympics. There needs to be facilities where people can, without too much expense, take part. But I do think that this can't happen. This promotion of physical activity, this encouragement to be involved, things have got to change to make possibilities a reality. It's no good motivating somebody to have an outstanding diet of X, Y, and Z if they can't afford to buy it, or if they can't actually get these particular foods to do it. So there's no answer except to say that there are activities like running, like walking, if you fancy that sort of thing, which are free. But in this day and age, you know, things aren't free. And if the government is really committed to lifelong participation, they have got to provide welcoming facilities to encourage people to take part. I'm sorry, there's no magic golden bullet. There's nothing magic. We've got to prepare, and then we've got to motivate, and then we've got to lead and enjoy and excite and benefit.
Margaret, if I can just add in, I think the other thing is in India is to maximise the areas that you do have, and there are many areas locally where physical activities can take place, and it's a question of modifying. It might not be the wonderful cricket pitch that you're experiencing, but many people play cricket in small areas around the country. And it's encouraging that and giving the knowledge and experience and confidence for people to play those activities themselves. One other question that's come up, Margaret, was about assessment. So I wonder if you could sort of.
Well, I'll start, shall I? There's a lot of work being done on assessment worldwide, and a number of countries have worked very hard. And one of my mantras is to say, if you're using any form of assessment or judgment on progress, that this exercise has to be a motivational tool. So it's assessment for learning. It's assessment of how am I getting on, where have I come from, how far have I come, and what do I need to do now? So assessment for me is a personal matter, and too many people are assessing and then matching assessment grades or something to norms of what people should do. Now that's not relevant. Your own progress is unique to you, and it's ipsative. It's looking at progress that you have made. Now then, there are two sorts of instruments. One is an instrument which, not in Canada and elsewhere, very technical, very detailed, and it goes into fitness and it goes into participation. And this is absolutely fine if you want to find out what the state of involvement is at a particular time. It is very labor intensive. I think it takes something like 3 lessons for 6 people who are trained to come and gather this information. Well, if that's what you want, if you want to know the situation, then you invest in that and you have an outcome. The other type of assessment, or rather charting progress, is where we are asking the participant to reflect on their involvement and how far they're involved, and what their goals are, what their problems are, etc. But because this physical activity is something which belongs to the people, let's ask them how competent they are, how much they enjoy, what range of participation have they had, what knowledge. Can't we ask them? And then this becomes a positive learning exercise, because they reflect on what their attitude is, they discuss how they can go forward, and they get support from the teacher. So we have in IPLA, the International Physical Literacy Association, we have gone down the self-report, because we're concerned that that individual has got the motivation, confidence, physical competence, knowledge and understanding to take part. If, from their perspective, how they view themselves, they are making progress and they're committed to going on, this seems to be a very positive outcome.
Wonderful, Margaret and Nigel. Would like, there are few media persons in the group. If somebody wants to ask a question, please go ahead and ask, and then we can see if time permits, we can take another couple of questions. Would like to see if any of the media persons would like to ask some questions. Just name yourself and ask the question, please.
While we're waiting, Gopi, there was a question of explaining the difference between physical education and physical literacy. I think that could be done very briefly, Margaret, while we're waiting for the
Physical
questions.
education is a subject on the curriculum and consists of lessons of different sorts of content. That's fine. Physical literacy is a goal. It's an aspiration. So there is no competition between the two. You don't teach physical literacy. You provide experiences which promote motivation. So one is an attitudinal goal, and the other is an organized session. They are related because we believe that the underlying aspiration of work in physical activity should be to ensure that they are motivated to continue. So for me, high quality physical education promotes lifelong physical activity.
Okay, I'll just pick another while we're waiting. There's a question about how can we help put this into physical education teacher training, and sort of linked to that is how do we raise the status of physical education teachers to help support that?
Well, raising the status is something which has got to come from corporate belief and commitment. We've too long been second-class citizens. We've too long been seen as a sort of extras if they've got time for it. And we'll get nowhere like that. It's very important that the head takes the lead. If a head takes the lead and provides the context for sufficient time, etc., I think that that would be a big plus. As far as training is concerned, the trainers, again, they need to consider if they feel that physical literacy is the way they want to see work develop towards promoting that. I think if the teacher trainers can set an example, can sign up to this goal, I think if as a group, the teacher trainers are saying, well, this is where we're going to go because there are benefits X, Y, and Z, I think that teachers in training who want to do the best for their youngsters, they want to do the best, I think they are persuadable. I think that with leadership, they will do it because those people themselves have benefited enormously. The people who are being trained, the trainees, they have benefited enormously from their participation in physical activity. Like me, that's where I got my self-esteem from. I did a PE training. So that you've got a captive audience, but now they move from themselves to how can I ensure that my pupils actually experience the quality, the benefits, the richness that I actually was privileged to have.
Right, there's two more quick questions, I think. How do we develop physical literacy for children with special needs?
You obviously you assess their potential, you assess their possibilities, and you have to use imagination in order to decide in which area they can progress and develop, and then they have particular goals that may be towards improving coordination, that may be towards walking, that may be towards responding in situations or aiming. And I think you need to take the individual and think, where is their potential? And there'll always be potential somewhere. There'll always be potential somewhere. So that individual can capitalize on their endowment, their aspects of endowment, which can be furthered. It's an individual challenge, but I passionately believe that everybody can be nurtured in one way or another.
Okay, and there's a question. Akash, yeah.
Akash is here. You can ask the question. Akash,
Yeah.
you can unmute yourself and ask, please.
I can't hear you.
No.
Hi, Margaret. This is Akash from Times of India Online. Can you hear me?
Hello, Agash. Hi.
Hi. It was firstly very, very good to hear all your thoughts on all the various issues that we've been talking about. The question that I wanted to ask you, Margaret, was that when it comes to an extremely populated country like India, apart from space constraints, what are the challenges would you say a very populous country like India faces when it comes to making people physically literate? And what would be your suggestions to overcome them?
Well, you have a very, very big country, and you have a huge population, and you have a massive task. I think I would just have to say, you've got to get a belief and a commitment, Akash. You've got to have people advocating this. Before you've got belief and advocacy, and this won't happen quickly. It won't happen quickly. But was talking to somebody recently, and they were saying this has got to grow. If we can involve a part of a state or a community, if we can work with them, their youngsters will grow up, and then they will have children, and we'll improve. I think we mustn't be too ambitious, but let's have some models. Let's have opportunities, and then hold those up and try and spread those. Look at why it's worked and hear from people for whom it's worked, hear from the practitioners, hear from the participants. I think it's got to be a relentless, step-by-step development of belief, passion and commitment, and provision of facilities and practitioners who are encouraging and supportive and really motivating for the participants. I'm sorry, there is no magic bullet.
If I just come in there, I think, as Margaret said, advocacy is the key to share the concept with everyone, but then education and training, you know, for the practitioners, for whether it's teachers, coaches, community workers, those are the real key ones. I think Ekanash has a question if he wants to unmute his microphone.
Thank you, Margaret. Thanks.
Ashim, if he can ask.
Ashim, yes. Yes, this is for Gopichand. So it's a very interesting topic, the kind of discussion which we're having, trying to stay on the same topic and ask a question related to COVID. So really, what are the challenges the Indian athletes will face when they resume the training after this, everything gets cleared up? And how should they follow the training procedure, and how can they keep themselves motivated?
Ashim, we can take this question offline. At the moment, I would really use this time of Margaret and Nigel to request them to answer questions which are relevant to it. From my side, I think for me, in my life, the void in sport, which was only looking at winning as a success, I think was evident somewhere in 2015. And for me, it was an important part of my life to realize the fact that sport for everybody is very, very important. And what Margaret said as an answer to the previous question strikes me for our country. We've been extras for too long. I think that needs to change. I think from our childhood, when we grow up as parents, we need to support our children to do more sport, and that needs to be a priority. It cannot be pushed out because of education at school. It cannot be pushed out. The physical education teacher cannot be pushed out because we have one teacher who needs to go out, and that cannot be the extra. So in life, also, it's like this is a very important part of our life, and that's what has really struck me out of this conversation. We cannot be extras for too long. I think physical activity needs to take center stage. It is important that many things in life, this is very, very important, and health, fitness, all of these things are very important. In these days of COVID, we see the need for it more and more. With this, thank you very much, Margaret. I think the passion which you bring in and the way you motivate people with your experiences and with your inspirational work is phenomenal. Thanks to the IPLA for helping us out. Thanks to Margaret, Nigel. If you want to have some concluding thoughts, please do so, because we've run a little bit out of time. But it's such an honor and a pleasure to meet and hear both of you. Margaret and Nigel, you want to share something? Please go ahead. Margaret and Nigel, you want to share something? Please.
You wish to say anything, Nigel?
Also, I see the hand raised of Rajesh Kalra. If you could go ahead and ask your question, please.
Well, I just want to thank you very much.
Margaret, just let Rajesh.
May I? Okay. So, Margaret, this question is something which is, I'm sure, bothering parents and everyone all over the world. How kids are more and more interested in playing only on the screens with PS4s and laptops and gadgets. We used to be out all the time, whether it's summers or winters. These kids are inside their rooms with the AC on, with the PS4, and downloading high-speed, games all the time. How do you take care of such situations when you want people to be physically literate, when they themselves are so disinterested in getting out of their homes?
Well, this is a worldwide problem, isn't it? And I have grandsons, and I know what the problem is. It's very difficult because it's an easy way out of keeping them safely, if you like, occupied. But I know that my son, he has two sons of 14 and 12, and they have a rule that they do not stay on their laptops for longer than an hour. I think that at the moment, an hour in the morning and the hour in the evening, and it is a regime that the parents have to ensure, and I think that they need to have positive experience so that they want to take part, they want to do something. If they don't want to do it, they're not going to expend energy in getting changed and going out. So I'm hoping that COVID has shown people that they benefit enormously from activity. We live in a very different world of social media and online. It's a very different world, which makes it all the more difficult, but all the more important that we raise our head above the parapet and we make as much noise as we can, because we're not doing, the human nature is not doing itself, human race is not doing itself any good by sitting still and only using a small part of their potential, their capacities in life. It's to our detriment.
If I can come in there, if you go back a number of years, the games that originally came in were very simple, very basic, and they started to engage some children. Games today are very technical. They've learned how to engage people, and they become addictive. Now we've got to look at our practices. A lot of the practices from a teaching point of view are old, are very traditional, and they are not engaging people. So we have got to change our practice, particularly in schools, so that it engages and enthuses people to be more physically active. So we've got to learn from that gaming situation.
Yeah,
Margaret,
well
I think
no, I mean, well said. I think that's a very good point.
Yeah, I think what Gopi was asking was for a sort of review, just a final few words from you.
Yes, well, I want just to say, as I said at the beginning, it's been a real honor and pleasure, Sri Gopi-san, to work with you leading up to this discussion and during the discussion. I'd like to thank you very much. I'd like to wish all of you in India the very best of luck and to promote physical activity. You have a hard task, but I think with a model as Gopi-Chand, I think that you've got a wonderful model to start with, somebody who is really committed and passionate. So I wish you all the very best of luck, and I look forward to keeping in contact with you in the future.
And from my point of view, I first came to India in 2016 and found the people and the country was absolutely superb and welcoming. But the key thing is there was a genuine desire from a large number of people, including you, Gopi, but many others who formed the ELMS group and many other teachers, lecturers and individuals to promote physical activity. And when you found physical literacy, you realized that was a way to move forward. You've now started a movement, and there are a lot of people who are joining in that movement, and a lot of people who've been on this call listening to Margaret. I think it's a question of now capitalizing on that, continue to make progress, work with governments, with politicians, with policymakers, with teachers, with coaches, and to share the concept of physical literacy so it then influences the generations of the future to be more physically active for their lives.
Thank you everyone
Thank you.
for joining. Thank you very much.